Thank you for tuning in to Corporate Volunteer Webinar. We're going to take the next 25 minutes and do two things. We're going to walk through some factual steps and realities to launching a corporate volunteer program, and then we're going to spend some time on the practical. We're going to introduce founder and CEO of Profits for Purpose, Jason Burns, and we're going to walk through the practical ways to discuss corporate volunteer programs with our bosses and management. Today, what we want to talk about are the realities that oftentimes launching a corporate volunteer program can be difficult to get buy-in. Often, when we sit and talk with our bosses and management, they are concerned about the bottom line, as they should be, as they are accountable to shareholders and such. And so oftentimes, they find themselves struggling with one very simple question. Will a community impact platform really drive our company forward? Day in and day out, their job is to answer that question. And so usually they answer that question with the following: paying attention to margins, products and services, and employees' retention and development. And so most of the time they're thinking on those subject matters, and oftentimes they overlook the reality, or even they're uneducated on the reality, that corporate volunteer programs, when you impact the community in the right way with the right tools, your employees and your customers become your biggest fans. Therefore, you, in a very progressive way, begin to drive your company forward. So what we want to talk about today is some factual ways that your customers and your employees can become your biggest fans. Let me start off just by saying this, that when we begin to impact the community, more people factually will switch to your company. As a matter of fact, 85% of people would switch to a company that is associated with a cause. This is a reality that we need to educate our bosses and management on, is that when people in the community begin to see that your company is associated with a cause, they would actually switch to your brand. That's a reality. That's an instinctual reality that the public has these days. Here's another interesting fact. 43% of people will simply talk about your brand and your company when they see that you're associated with a cause. The reality is they'll just talk about your company more when you begin to associate with a cause. So when we begin to put these stats together, just these simple high-level stats, and we sit with our bosses and say, here's the reality. When we engage in the community, people are going to switch to our brand. People are going to talk about our brand, and we are going to be more infectious and influential in the community. We see this all the time in practical ways, whether we're at Starbucks grabbing a coffee and they are making very clear statements that they're impacting the community just by looking at their cup. Or maybe if you've gone to Target and you're checking out, and if you're anything like most of us, when you go to Target, you end up buying so much more than you need, and you're checking out and you're going, oh my goodness, why am I spending all this money? And then you always look up and there's a huge board right on the way that you walk out saying, here's all the ways that we're impacting the community with your investment dollars. The reality is that people recognize that people are talking and switching brands when we're involved in these causes. And so it's not just customers. It's not just kind of the subconscious customer that's going on. Our employees become our biggest fans. Let me just walk you through some practical ways that when we begin to get involved in the local community, that our employees are getting more excited. Here's the first thing. Our recruitment options and recruiting power begins to go up when our company's involved in causes. For example, 65% of students, next generation leaders that are graduating from upper education, are expecting to make a positive difference in the world through their workplace. This is a wild trend that's happening. Next generation leaders, it's not just that they're wanting or desiring to make an impact, they're actually expecting to. It's a natural expectation. In fact, here's another one. 45% of millennials said that they would take a 15% pay cut just to work with a company that's making a difference. The reality is that emerging leaders and next generation employees are just simply viewing the world differently. And so as a corporation, as an employment center, we need to begin to understand that we are working with a totally new generation of next generation leaders, ones with expectations, ones that'll actually take pay cuts because they want to have purpose and value. Their purpose and value is no longer simply just things and possessions, although certainly those will always be a part of their reality. It's also that they desire to give back. So recruitment is beginning to change as we work with next generation leaders. It's not just that, it's also retention. Workers are more satisfied in their jobs by a 2-to-1 ratio when their companies are giving back. This is just a reality that the employees are happy. They're satisfied when they go to their work and say, man, I love working for a company that's giving back. It makes me happy to be doing that. But it's not just recruitment and retention, it's also training. Companies will save on an average of $800 per employee per year on training costs when they're giving back. Because here's the reality, when we begin to give back, we are with our employees, we are naturally training them on the values that we have as a corporation. Just by giving back, we're training them on a certain posture and behavior, a certain reputation and way that we approach our communities. And so when we're giving back, not only are we building recruitment, not only are we building training, but we're also building retention. And so just by being with our employees in these environments, we're saving money and we're gaining ground. Furthermore, here's some information that I think is very important that when we sit with our bosses that we can talk about. 72% of companies today, emerging companies today, have a formal corporate responsibility program. This number has jumped up 10% in just the last year. So when we look at our competition, when we look at the other companies that we're working against, 72% of them say this is a value, we're going to have it instilled in our companies. So we have to ask ourselves the question, do we have that? 62% of organizations actually have a position in their organization to drive corporate responsibility. This has jumped up 20% in just the last year as well. 95% of Fortune 250 companies have a published sustainability report. So the reality is that national and global leaders actually have reports that are presenting this. And so here's the point that we want to sit down and make with our bosses on just the factual realities. Customers become fans. Customers speak about our companies when we're involved in these things. Employees become fans. They're more satisfied. Their expectations are met. They're even willing to take pay cuts. Our training dollars go down. The reality is this: when we sit with our bosses and they ask this very fair question, will a community impact platform really drive our company forward? The answer is simply this: yes. Because when we do, we cultivate fans in the community. We cultivate fans in our company. And when someone's a fan, it's so much greater than an employee or a customer. You know, one of the things that often we have to help realize is that really our goal is not to create customers and employees. Customers leave, employees leave, fans don't. We see this, don't we, in everything in reality? I mean, think of some of the local sports teams where we see no matter, even if there's a losing record, they're watching. Even if there's a losing record, they're staying faithful because they're a fan. And that's what we want to do. We want to create fans out of our customers. We want to create fans out of our employees. So no matter what's going on in the good days and in the challenging days of our organization, our employees and our customers are staying because they're fans. Now here's what we want to do. We know that this is more than just factual information that you need to go talk to your boss about. We want to introduce Jason Burns, and Jason's going to walk us through the practical ways. How do we actually have conversations with our bosses about bringing these on? So let's turn to that right now. Welcome, Jason Burns from Props for Purpose. Thanks for being here today with us and taking time to field some of these questions for us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
Right on. Hey, listen, as we talk about this, one of the most important questions that jump off my mind is when an HR director or a community relations director goes to meet with their boss, What's the most important element they need to walk in with so that they don't walk in empty-handed to this conversation?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the biggest piece is a game plan. A lot of times these things with the champions, people get really excited and with the vision and thought about engaging their companies in the community and doing great work. A lot of times they'll come in and just spew off a lot of what if we can do this or that. And with how busy the boss is and everyone else is, they don't really have a strategic approach or process to accomplish those goals.
Gotcha. So rather than just walking in with a bunch of passion, actually walk in with a game plan.
Exactly.
And that makes sense, but probably for most of us out there, we're going, what does a game plan look like? What are elements of the game plan that of course you've done this with companies of all sizes, all across really the globe. What are key elements to a game plan that you would just say you got to have these?
Yeah, and I'd say there's really four big elements there. The first one is at a high level coming in with setting goals and saying, rather than just a bunch of feel goods and some events throughout the year, what are we trying to accomplish? Whether it's working with a handful of organizations or many organizations, what are the number of volunteer hours, or even down to the specific activities, whether it's we want to help these amount of kids to read or feed this amount of homeless people, but just having something that you can lay out there, get people excited about, and then measure against those.
Okay, so first one is goals. What's the next one?
Second one is communicating that out to the employee base to get them excited to want to jump in ways that they can give of their time and talents and jump on board.
Okay, so sitting with my boss, here's the goals, here's what we want to accomplish, here's the communication plan by which we'll communicate these goals to the employees. Next step.
Next step is the actual implementation. So when employees are excited and on board, but they're busy, so how do you make it easy for them to connect with the charities that you're working with or their favorite charities? And how is it easy for them to look at their busy calendar and find ways that they can easily plug in and get involved and give back?
And that's got to be an arduous task to take all of these ideas, these opportunities, and actually implement it. And I'm sure I could see how a boss would say, look, I want to know how you're going to implement this to, whether it's a company of 100 employees or 10,000 employees, we're going to implement a process and that's important. So goals, communicating those goals, implementing the program and the process to the company. What's next?
The next one is maintaining participation. So you have that initial excitement. You have make it easy for employees right out of the gate to connect and get involved. But as employees are busy, different things and priorities are coming up throughout the year, how do companies really push that ball forward throughout the year and make it consistent? And some of those things are really about recognition and celebrating those results. So being able to, throughout the year, communicate back to employees and say, this is what we've done, this is what your coworkers have done. Collectively, this is how our organization has united our team across one location or locations across the country to make a huge impact.
I could see that being true because it's anything that's new is exciting, and I'm sure a boss sees that and knows that. And it's like, hey, this is new, this is exciting, but what happens when the new and the excitement wear off? And what you're saying is to communicate those results over and over again of like, hey, Jim did an amazing job at doing this. Sally did an amazing job at doing this. People are making impact every day here. Let's keep doing it. So that makes sense. So you go into your boss and you go, these are our goals. This is how we're going to communicate those goals. This is our implementation strategy. This is how we're going to communicate wins inside of our organization to continue to fire up the troops. And you said there was one last one when we talked.
Yeah, the last one is really that ROI, and you've invested some time into this strategy. You've accomplished some of these great things, but really looking at with those things involved, is it worth it to continue to push those things forward for the next year? A big part of that is getting employee feedback and voice about the program and finding out. We started this year really with a mission of being a big community player, and we've accomplished these things, whether it's volunteer hours with those specific activities and ways that we strengthened our community. How did that make you feel as an employee? Do you feel more connected to the company? Is this something that gives you additional pride and something that we want to keep going? So a big part is the survey process, and also looking at going all the way back to step one of, did we hit those goals and benchmark? If so, how do we raise the bar to do even more next year? If not, what are things that we need to tweak week, so we can have more success and keep this going.
Gotcha, that makes sense. Those are great elements to a strategic plan, no doubt about it. Let me ask this question. I'm an HR director, I'm a communications director, and I want to bridge the gap from my passion and my strategy to actually getting the buy-in from my boss. What's the best way to present this? I mean, I'm sitting in my office, my boss is sitting in their office, and I actually want to get face-to-face buy-in, get this ball moving. What would you recommend my steps to be to make that happen?
Yeah, it goes back to that game plan and taking the time to think through those steps before you have an initial meeting. And as we found that the bosses and executive team is very busy, so coming in with that strategic approach, and once you have that, scheduling a face-to-face meeting is what we found to be the best approach, and sitting down and running through those things of what's the budget goals, how are we going to engage our employees, and how are we going to accomplish these great things to really turn both our employees into big fans, and also being able to broadcast and turn our consumers and strengthen our brand in that way as well.
Very good. Now, let's play this out a little bit. Obviously, you've had the opportunity to work with so many different companies. We were talking earlier. I mean, you've launched globally with Staples, and so you've worked with communication strategies, I'm sure, all up and down there. In fact, we were just talking today. You launched TaylorMade today, and so
we did, yeah.
Certainly you told me that was quite a process of just working through different things with IT and implementation. And so with a lot of the organizations you've worked with, you've worked with different pushbacks. And this is the question I want to talk to you about. When an HR director or communications director is going to sit across the table from the decision maker, what are the pushbacks that they need to be prepared for? And what are some practical answers that you might offer for them? So, hey, here's my idea, here's my strategic plan, and from what you've seen, here is probably some of the pushbacks they're gonna run into. What are some? Give us some and some answers to those.
Some of the main pushbacks that we've seen in working with launching these programs is, number one is always cost.
Of course, yeah.
You know, what's this going to cost? What's the investment? We're busy in budgeting all these different things, and really the main components of costs are looking at what the programs entail, how to incentivize, inspire, and do it in a way that is budget friendly. So whether that's small raffles or grants to charities that employees are working with, but being able to really communicate in a concise way to your boss of here's the costs involved, here's some of the incentives, and utilizing employees' skills and abilities out in the community, which doesn't cost anything. The biggest pieces are rewarding and getting them excited to do so.
Great. So costs are going to be that of maybe the program that you're running, and then the reward system in which you put in. And of course, that will probably range by the level of investment that a company would want to make. But those are the two things that they need to be looking at. That makes sense.
Yeah.
What's some more pushbacks they might get?
Pushback is, how do we know that employees are going to grab a hold and this program is going to receive traction? If we do a good job at communicating across all of our locations, the risk is nobody will jump on board. And what we've seen is as long as you have a couple things in place that you do get a lot of initial traction, those few things are rewards and recognition. Even though the intentions of the employees are to be a part of something bigger than themselves, to make an impact in their community, everybody by human nature loves to be recognized for what they're doing. So people love where if they're doing something and they're making, whether it's sharing stories or if the company has the ability to share pictures, whether it's a newsletter or different ways to really broadcast out players or employees that are really living out that vision and culture of the company. People love to see that, and we've seen once you get those initial recognition and rewards pieces in place, the program really snowballs and participation takes off.
Cool. So cost, traction, anything else that they're going to run into?
Yeah, a big part is making it clear right out of the gate of who's leading this thing. Big piece is it down to a couple key employees that this falls in their responsibility. A lot of times it'll start in HR. HR directors are wearing a lot of different hats, so a lot of times it's sharing a little bit of the workload to making those steps happen. Whether that's through getting employees together who are champions and forming a committee to help delegate some of those initial tasks and work, or whether it's a part of somebody's formal job description.
Sure, makes sense.
But making sure that leadership's in place.
Yeah. So sitting across my boss, he's going to say, what's it going to cost us? How do we know that this is going to get traction and work? Who's going to drive this thing? Is it going to be an employee-led thing? Is it going to be a position-led thing? Anything else that they're going to want to know?
I'd say the last big element, coming back to that ROI piece and the whole program, looking at, is it really worth the time and money and investment that we're putting into it? And to answer that question, you have to have that tracking component. So there has to be a clear approach to track how employees are getting involved and to really celebrate both internally and externally to the brand. So whether that's through an internal intranet system, there's whether it's through a platform out there, it's something in-house to be able to measure, here's charities we're working with, here's what we've done with each of those charities, and here's the volunteer hours and impact that we've had for the year.
You know, that makes sense too, because we were discussing offline here a little bit that, decision makers certainly, and we hope, care about their employees and care about the community. But at the end of the day, they're responsible to shareholders and they're responsible to employees to be able to provide a stable enough organization to provide for employees and shareholders. And so really what they do want to know is bottom line statistics.
Right.
Show me how this is advancing our organization. And so, like you say, it makes so much sense to be able to have some sort of platform that communicates that, tracks that, and does those kind of things. Hey, Jason, thanks so much just for spending time with us today. I think that is, man, just great practical information for anybody, whether it's an HR director, community relations director, that wants to push a program forward and have some success. And, man, we wish you all the success in your company, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. It's been a pleasure.
All right.